begin, you were young, 24 years of age, and you were, I think, was it the general manager of Blue Mountain Publishing?
That's correct, yeah.
What was your role, and what did that entail, being the general manager of Blue Music Publishing?
Blue Mountain.
Yeah.
Well, Blue Mountain Music was a very small publishing company owned by Chris Blackwell. It was never part of the Island Group, even though Chris Blackwell owned Island Records. He owned Blue Mountain separately. It was a very personal company for him. And the general manager, the first job of the general manager was to effectively sort out the company. It needed a bit of sorting out. It controlled most of the reggae catalogue. It had some great non-reggae things. It had the band Free, it had U2, but it controlled most of the reggae catalogue of Island Music Publishing. And my first job was to make sure that everything was properly, duly registered with all of the collection societies around the world, and everything was being properly administered. But more importantly was to make sure that some of those songs were being covered by people. So I was sending out songs to Tina Turner, to whoever it was that would possibly cover one of those songs. And I just, I think, made an impression on Chris Blackwell because I didn't know what couldn't be done, so I tried everything. So I was pretty naive and pretty, I won't say aggressive in my prosecution of the value of Blue Mountain's catalogue, but I really pushed it and really ran with it.
So subsequently from there, you were at Island Records.
No, but there was a journey, really.
A journey.
I had a tiny budget. I was allowed, I think, £50,000 a year, which sounds, some of your viewers might think that's a lot, but in terms of A&R budgets, that's a tiny amount. And so I started signing things with Chris Blackwell early on and had a few successes. And I think in 1985 had my first #1 worldwide. I signed a group called Colorbox, and they in turn formed a subgroup called Mars, and they in turn had the #1 hit, Pump Up the Volume, which was so massive and the first of its kind in terms of sampled music. On a worldwide basis, it was huge, #1 in 15 countries, including America. And I'd also signed it to Island in America as a record label, and it was the first #1 in Island Records history.
At that time, did you feel that you'd made it? That, once you knew that these artists had gone to #1, how did that make you feel?
It was an unbelievably positive time in my life. I never thought that it was easy, it wasn't, but I did notch up a few successive successes that made me feel that somehow I was onto it, I was going in the right track. I can't begin to tell you how unbelievably supported I was by Chris Blackwell, who spotted me young and early and really believed in me, way beyond his right to believe in me, or way beyond my expectation. And he really gave me incredible creative confidence to get out there. He taught me very early on that I shouldn't be listening to the radio. I remember I taught him a succession of things which he liked, but he thought he'd heard it before. And he taught me a really good lesson early on, which was stop listening to the radio, don't listen to Radio 1, because if you're influenced by what you hear on Radio 1, you're making decisions that are 3 years out of date, because the Radio 1 track was signed and created 3 years ago. And what you need to be doing is doing your own deals, thinking of your own ideas and signing your own acts. And that's where, for argument's sake, the Colorbox Mars Pump Up the Volume track came from. But then subsequently to that, I signed De La Soul, for instance, music publishing. I signed Massive Attack's music publishing. And all of those signings, really, and many others too, but all of those signings were really, as far as I'm concerned, based upon me taking Chris Blackwell's model of looking for things that stood apart from everything else, not things that stood alongside everything else. So really I've been lucky to have been very well taught and given that luxury of turning over stones that nobody else was turning over. So, some of my crucial signings have been not really in competition with the rest of the industry. Well, it was a really difficult time for Island because I got the job pretty much a month after Island was purchased and stopped being indie. So Island was purchased by Polygram, part of the Philips Group, a publicly quoted company, huge company, already the #1 music company in the world, and suddenly little old Island gets integrated into it. And I got the job as the managing director. But unfortunately, as with all of these takeovers, there were kind of rules and there were sort of things that were expected of me that were really quite difficult.